Good afternoon. Eric Bancroft here on behalf of the Clarity crew, coming at you with your 5 at 5 today. I'm thinking back at the time about 11 years ago when I was on the phone with my family, with me on the speakerphone, talking to my mom. And to our surprise, later what we learned while she was talking to us, where she lived with the rest of my family in another state, she had a brain aneurysm. And she ended up dying from it. It was a sudden and shocking way to lose your parent unexpectedly and in the most dramatic of ways. And you can imagine in the aftermath of that, just kind of reeling from she's gone and just didn't expect that. And a lot of those thoughts about, man, I wish I could have said something or done something. But, by God's grace, I had a great relationship with my mom. And she knew Christ and is present with the Lord. Absent from the body is present with the Lord. But what was striking to me in the aftermath of that time was the people's comments to me that they said. I trust everybody who made a comment to me meant well. But not every comment made landed well. It was difficult to receive at times as people would, I think, speak before they would think. And some of those words that were intended to exercise love or consolation for the loss of my mom instead were irritating at best and maybe even hurtful at worst. And I'm reminded as I reflect back on that about how difficult it can be for us to show compassion to people who are hurting. As we see in recent days, these are unbelievably difficult times. Global pandemic alone has so many ripple effects from not only how we process it financially, people losing their jobs, unemployment at a record high, to how we process it spiritually, doubting if God's in control, feeling anxious about tomorrow, to even how we process it communally, being removed from people relationally, not being able to be present in our churches where we can sing and have the word taught to us in person and our pastors meet with us. And so it can be difficult. Well, then you add on top of that what has been and continues to be a very loaded, challenging, very emotionally charged conversation about injustice, about racism, and about so many other related topics that people engage in differently. In the middle of all of this, people are hurting. They're hurting. And what I want to do today is I want to build on what Daniel shared yesterday when he talked about speak less, love more. I want to talk specifically kind of as a branch off of that tree that he has planted for us to talk about what does it look like for us to specifically, when we do speak, how do we show compassion? And just to kind of ground our thoughts, I want to read to you from 1 Peter chapter 3. Scattered Christians because of persecution, going through difficult times, not the same reason, but for different reasons. And listen to how Peter addresses these Christians. He says, finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. I am mindful in these days how difficult it can be for people to think of others, or when trying to speak to others, to think of others in a way that is tremendously thoughtful about them and to show love to them. No doubt a number of you viewers have a variety of opinions on how these topics should be thought about and dealt with. And because of those differences, there is kind of an approach of withdrawing, not only from the conversation, but withdrawing from the community of relationships. That's not unity when we withdraw. That's disunity. And I want to talk about what it means to speak to people and show compassion. As I reflect back on my mom's passing, what could have people done differently? I think what they could have done differently is to honestly acknowledge the hurt I was feeling, the emotion I was going through, and not try to offer words of similar experience, which can be condescending and patronizing. But instead to just say, man, I love you and I cannot imagine what you are feeling, but I want you to know that I'm praying for you and I care for you. Those kind of words might be difficult to hear from you if you don't already have conversations and relationships with people. And so I want to just encourage you, what kind of relationships do you have? What kind of conversations are you having with them? And how are you showing compassion? How do you, in the words of Peter here, how do you have sympathy for someone else who has different experiences than you? How do you demonstrate brotherly love? That is, in that very term, that modifier, like a family. How do you demonstrate a tender heart? I think some of you ought to maybe consider auditing your social media posts. Ought to maybe think about what you're saying to your brothers and sisters in your churches that maybe you're not even aware and that you need to be concerned about. Does this show unity of mind and brotherly love? More to be said on that, to be sure, but at least enough for today for a 5 at 5 on how to show compassion, how to show love in a way that reflects a unity of mind around the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is Eric Bancroft coming to you with your 5 at 5 on behalf of the Clarity Crew. Have a great night.